All right, good morning, everybody. I've got 8:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Ed Keith, Deschutes County Forester. Welcome to the August meeting of Project Wildfire. Just a quick overview of what we have planned today. Boone has the agenda up on the screen, but we'll just be providing a few short program updates. Along with taking any questions from last month's minutes. And then we thought we'd take a little bit deeper dive into community wildfire protection plans. We mentioned this a little bit at the last meeting, but we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into our new story map that explains community wildfire protection plans in Deschutes County. In the context of our current revision, which is the Greater Bend Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So Boone and I will kind of be tag teaming that presentation. And then of course, we'll save some time for some updates from everybody here. So thanks for joining us. Before I hand it over to Boone, I just wanted to share a couple updates from my side of things. Just so people are aware of a couple things that are out there. And I will just pause and say thank you all for putting your name and affiliation in the chat box by way of introductions. I see a lot of those popping up. I appreciate that. That helps us capture who all is in the meeting. So if you haven't done that, it'd be great if you pop your name and affiliation into the chat box. So thank you. Okay, so just a couple short updates on my end. I wanted to be sure that everybody was aware that our discretionary fuels reduction grants are now open for application. The quickest way to find the application form is to go to deschutes.org/grants. That will take you to a page where there are two PDF documents, and one of those is our discretionary fuels reduction grant. That grant is open through, open through September 30th. So there's plenty of time, hopefully, for communities to plan projects. We hosted our first informational meeting yesterday. We had about 26 or 7 people attend that. So it looks like there's quite a bit of interest in those grants. We have $100,000 available for communities this year. So looking for some great project proposals and looking forward to funding some good work through that grant. So we do have one more meeting coming up, and that's the August 26th meeting in the afternoon. Again, if you download that application, there's a link to register for that. And it's basically just a question and answer session. So it's your chance to ask any questions if you're a community and have a project in mind. That's your second chance, with the first one being yesterday. So that's my first update. The second one I wanted to mention was that Senate Bill 762 that hopefully most of you have heard about a little bit about by now. There's some rulemaking going on. There's Senate Bill 762 was the omnibus wildfire bill that came out of the Oregon legislature, the session that just closed. It has many different sections in it that all address different things, from wildfire response and increasing fire protection across the state to funding forest resilience. But there are some other components that are proceeding with rulemaking through the Oregon Department of Forestry right now. And there are 3 different rulemaking committees, or 4 actually. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I just wanted to mention that is out there and happening. And I was going to put in the chat ODF's webpage for you all if you want to follow along with rulemaking on that. The most near-term thing that's going to be happening is that the first rulemaking committee is going to be defining the wildland-urban interface, and that's kind of the first step towards determining where defensible space and building codes are going to be required through the state. The next steps after that are basically making a map of the WUI based on that definition that should be finalized fairly quickly here. Actually, today's meeting at 10 o'clock is set to, it's going to be our last meeting on defining the WUI before that moves towards public comment, and then the Board of Forestry finalizes that rulemaking. So public comment in September, and the Board of Forestry will finalize that definition in October. And then the map making will be moving forward after that. So there's lots of different rulemaking meetings. They're all open to the public. And again, if you want to tune into that website, there's links to all the documentation and meeting videos and all that. All the meetings are virtual, so you can watch them all from the comfort of your home or office. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that those are moving forward, and if you want to engage or provide comment on any of those processes, I would encourage you to do so. So with that, I will turn it over to Boone for any other program updates.
Forget that I mute myself. Yeah, pretty quick, right? You know, this summer I've been working out on fires and just supporting things and tracking things along. So not a ton of different projects going on per se, but still busy nonetheless. Our Firewise sites continue to ramp up. You know, we just had Skyliners, which I was hoping one of them were on the phone today. I'm not sure if there are, if anyone's here. But they, you know, we started talking with them years ago about becoming Firewise recognized, and then over time there's been a few different people that I've talked to up there, but we've finally made that step where they've gone through the full process and then submitted their application, and yay, just last week or week before last, they got their final congratulations, you've been recognized as a Firewise site. So pretty excited to have them as part of our Firewise communities, right? And especially when you think about how much work has gone on up Skyliners Road there, on both sides of the road. The Forest Service has done a lot of work along with all the private lands as well, with the tree farm and the properties just up the hill to the west of the tree farm there. So lots of good work up there. Pretty excited about it. So far, we've got quite a few communities that have come into the Firewise program this year, and so there's 5 of them listed there, right? But there's at least 5, if not more than that, right now that are in process of either waiting for approval or submitting applications. So pretty busy year with Firewise communities. And I definitely want to say thanks to ODF for being partners on that, and all the fire departments as we've kind of come through each of the different structure departments and work together and being able to go out and walk the communities with those folks. It definitely pays off pretty big, and especially as we're kind of turning and we're talking about those grants that Ed just covered. Those discretionary grants are pretty awesome for those communities, and they're pretty excited to be able to compete for those and be able to get those to help their communities move along. But either way, pretty awesome to see how much participation there is and how much community is engaged with it. Also, I guess while I'm here and I'm thinking about it, I'm going to put a link into the chat for those Deschutes grants, just so you can pull that up, look at the application, get the link to that next informational meeting that Ed's got planned, so people can learn more about them. You know, and I just want to say one piece of this, because it feels like the question always comes around. It's just reminding folks that, right, when you're looking at these grants and you're planning on applying for them, the more participation you can get across your community, the better they're going to rate. So think about big projects, or at least projects that are going to impact several folks and not just 1 or 2 landowners. And then I guess I got one, besides the shameless plug for our Firewise story map, which I need to update with these new communities. That's why I put it on there. But we have that shameless plug, and then also I have the shameless plug for our trifold. If anyone is needing any copies of it, I thought I'd throw that reminder out there one more time. So I've got a couple thousand copies here. I've got quite a few of those out and handing out anywhere from, you know, a dozen to several hundred to folks, depending on how big their networks are. But if you're wanting to get that out to your community or within your network, do send me an email, and I'll hook you up with whatever you need there. It's nice, simplified, and easy to follow along with. So I think those are the big updates that I have right now. And then if we want, Ed, I can turn the sharing over to you, and then we can jump into the CWPP story map. And like Ed said a little bit ago, we're going to just follow along using the story map as kind of the template for talking through the CWPPs across the county today. Ed will start us off with talking about the history and the background of the CWPPs, and then I'll jump in halfway through it and kind of talk about where we're at with more of our protection capabilities, action plan, implementation, and then also the updates with I forgot my camera, it's down here. The BIN CWPP and all the updates that we're going through there as well. So Ed, it's all you here.
Okay. Yeah, so like I said, we felt like it was a pretty good time with the current revision of the Greater Bend Community Wildfire Protection Plan being out for some public review and comment, that we just run through a little bit of the basics of community wildfire protection plans. A lot has evolved over the years, so I'm going to just start out with a little bit of the basics before I turn it over to Boone to delve into some more details. And again, this is a new website that we have worked on to kind of conceptualize and explain a little bit more about our community wildfire protection plan. So I'm just going to be running through this, but if you want to refer back to it at any time, there's some cool mapping tools in here you can explore further after the meeting today. We can share a link to this. So first off, just a little bit about the history of community wildfire protection plans. They really started after the passage of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act back in 2003. And they were really conceived from that with the idea that communities could provide input both to the federal land managers, but also prioritize work on private lands to help channel new and available funding through the National Fire Plan. And so the idea was that if you had a community wildfire protection plan and had those priorities in place for both federal and private, a little bit of feedback. Sorry about that. Just a little bit of feedback. So basically, that's where CWPPs came from. We had two communities in Deschutes County that both saw that opportunity, immediately started making their own plans, and that was the Greater Sisters area and the Upper Deschutes River area through the Upper Deschutes River Coalition at the time. Now they're the Upper Deschutes River communities, but still we had two really community-driven plans right out of the gate, starting in 2000 and late 2003 and 2004. And that really set the direction for community wildfire protection plans in Deschutes County by, instead of having one countywide plan, we had 7 separate plans that ended up being developed around the different communities in the county. And so that's kind of how we came to have 7, was that they were really, the communities wanting to have those plans and have those prioritized work plans in place to help guide funding that was available at the time, and also help prioritize work on federal lands around those communities. Those plans kind of took their own pathway, but then Project Wildfire became kind of the caretaker and steward of those to make sure that those stayed alive and up to date. So they've become a little bit more standardized over time, but they still have kind of their own uniqueness in a way. They have different language and different priorities and a few different nuances in every plan. So anyhow, this shows a map of the 7 different CWPP areas outlined in red. There are a couple areas that go outside of Deschutes County, and those are due to fire protection jurisdiction. So up in the Sisters area, the Sisters Camp Sherman Fire District goes up into Jefferson County. In the Alfalfa area, the Alfalfa Fire Department covers a small portion of Crook County. And then out in the eastern part of the county, the Brothers Hampton Rangeland Fire Protection Association covers areas up into Crook County. And so we recognize that jurisdiction. Instead of splitting those at the county line, we've included the entire fire protection jurisdiction within the planning boundary. So these are the planning boundaries of those 7 plans. And just by way of how to navigate this map, like you can zoom in and out on each of these plan areas, and then they are clickable as well. So you can click on that and you can then follow the links and find those plans. So there are plans embedded inside the map, as well as links over here to each of the plans. So it's a good place to find all the plans if you're wanting to look at more than one of the community wildfire protection plans. One of the key things that these community wildfire protection plans do then is once the planning boundary is established, we do establish and define the wildland urban interface within each of these plans. And so this map shows where we've defined wildland urban interface up to now within Deschutes County. Some of the plan areas, the entire plan area is considered wildland urban interface. In other areas, we exclude certain places because of lack of development or wilderness areas, those sorts of things. So, for example, just take the Greater Sisters area. These areas that are not crosshatched are not considered WUI. They are either wilderness areas or areas of land that just are so far away from development that they're not a priority as far as fuel reduction for the protection of the community. Other areas like the Sun River area, the Upper Deschutes area, the Greater Lapine area, basically the plan boundary and the WUI are coincident. They're one and the same. So we have defined that WUI, and then that does help us then prioritize work to try to say that, you know, we're going to work from the community out and try to not be working in the back 40 so much, but prioritizing our fuels dollars to that work around the community. It will be interesting to see as the Senate Bill 762 moves forward, and there'll be a definition of WUI for the state, how that might influence future community wildfire protection plans. But anyhow, this pulls together the WUI that we've defined through our community wildfire protection plans across the county. In the past, we have, well, I'm going to jump ahead there. Just real quickly, I don't want to delve into this one too much, but there are then vegetation types. We further break down each of these into different vegetation types because the diversity of vegetation across the county does necessitate different approaches in different vegetation types. We do call those out. You can then delve in and explore these maps. And again, this layer is clickable if you want to explore the different vegetation types that are mapped through the county. I didn't plan to spend a whole bunch of time on this layer, but I just wanted to mention it before I jump ahead to the risk assessment. So the risk assessment is a really key component of the community wildfire protection plans. And that is not quite displaying correctly. There we go. Just a quick adjustment here. All right. So the risk assessment in the past, up until 2019 or so, we had used a pretty dated we had been using the same risk assessment process that was drafted by the Oregon Department of Forestry since 2004, since the beginning of community wildfire protection plans. And within that, then we had what we were calling sub-geographic areas. So we would break each planning area up into sub areas and then conduct a risk assessment on each sub-geographic area. With the advent of the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer that was that brought together the more recent risk data and other data layers through the U.S. Forest Service quantitative risk assessment. We have now been transferring our plans over to using the risk assessment through the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer. So we've pulled in a couple of those layers into this story map just to display a few different layers of risk.
And I'm not sure why, but your map is definitely hung up on one of those screens. You might try that home button on the bottom right to see if that. No. But I thought that would refresh it to show the.
I'm going to try scrolling down again. Yeah, the map should have been showing at the start, maybe because I skipped ahead. There we go. The risk by watershed. So this sums up the total risk by different watersheds. This is just one layer that's available in the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer. You can then delve into a more finer scale risk. And again, this is just a few of the different layers that are available in the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer, which is its own standalone website with a whole bunch of data. We've just pulled in a few of these data layers just to highlight a couple of those more useful layers from that product. And again, you can zoom in and really kind of delve into the risk in greater detail if you want. So this is all available. You can, when we're going through a CWPP, then we upload a shape of each of these plans and then export about a 35-page risk assessment for each community wildfire protection plan area. And so that's what we've been, as we were revising these plans, we were using this tool to update our risk assessment from the process that we had been using before about 2019 or so. So far, the Greater Lapine, the Sun River, the Greater Sisters have all been plans that have been signed off with that new risk assessment. The Greater Bend plan, we have that risk assessment out in draft form along with the rest of the plan. We hope to finalize that in September. I think we're coming to the close of the public comment period at the end of this month. We'll take any of those public comments that we get, and then we'll be taking that around for the different signatures. And so the folks that sign that are the Board of County Commissioners, the Oregon Department of Forestry, and the Fire Protection District. So in this case, the City of Bend Fire Department, Deschutes Rural number 2, as well as the City of Bend itself will all be signatures to the Bend plan. So anyhow, just a few different data layers that we put up there. If you want to explore them further, I would encourage you to grab a link to this map and explore your area of interest within the county. So that's a few of the kind of introductory things that I had. And at this point, I think Boone is going to take it from here for the rest of the story map.
Get myself unmuted again. Yeah, and just a couple of things I wanted to go to just to add on to what Ed just said there. This community assessment of risk, if you wanted to look at your own report or draw your own area of interest, whether that's a watershed or maybe the CWPP, or look at the county as a whole or whatever it might be, you can follow this link here and you can create your own report, one that'll do your individual home or one that does a greater area. And I have a little bit of, just as a disclaimer for doing your own home, just want you to remember that it doesn't take into account what you have planted around your house and your landscaping and stuff. It's a pixelated, it's done on pixels, so it's not your individual home. It's like I think it might be a 2.5 kilometer pixel. I'd have to look up what it is that they use, but either way, it's a larger pixel, so it represents a large piece of land, not just your individual lot. And then the other one that I think is kind of fun, right, is we put this in here, and I think most people pass by it without thinking much of it, but we put in this 4-foot flame lengths in here, and there's a couple of reasons for doing it. One is it definitely helps to quantify and kind of illustrate the potential that we have across the county for the fire, right? The size of the flames, but the size of the flames is a direct indicator of the intensity of the fires that we would have out there. So if we're thinking about dry pine sites and we want to have low intensity fires, we would be able to look at that and think, okay, well, we want something around a 4-foot flame or less, because it kind of works somewhat of as a surrogate for intensity of fire. And then also when we're, as a firefighter side of things, 4-foot flames has been kind of deemed the size of flames in which it's easiest to use people on the ground. It's a little safer, a little more direct attack, a little, just overall, it's a nice size flame length to shoot for. And I guess with a disclaimer on that though also is that this isn't readily updated every day. So if you're doing work and it's changed the 4-foot flame lengths out there, it's not going to be reflected until the data layers beneath it are updated. And that gets updated every so often. I don't know the regime on how often that gets, the interval that gets updated on. So I'm going to jump into the protection capabilities and then take it from there. And then we'll cover the Bend CWPP as far as what we've updated in that after we finish kind of going through an overview of the of CWPPs as a whole. And I apologize, you guys are looking up at me because my other screen's right above the camera. So just, kind of framing this up to start with, I had a question the other day that made me realize, like, even though we work in this field, sometimes we don't realize the way that things work, but I thought it's a good one to point out. So I thought two things here we can talk about: CWPP's protection capabilities, but also be able to kind of talk a little bit more about some of the agencies that are here and then how it does work on the ground when we do have fire. So I thought I'd kind of roll those two things together. When we think about wildland fires out there, and then also just any kind of emergency that's happening, there are essentially two different dispatch centers that are being utilized. One is the 911 dispatch center that's dispatching ambulances, police, some fire, especially when it comes to structure fire. But if we're thinking about wildland fire, that's coming through Central Oregon Interagency Dispatch Center, which dispatches fire resources, wildland fire resources to those fires. So interagency is somewhat the key, right? We have several partners that work within that capacity. And then being an interagency center, one of the things that we're doing, right, is if somebody calls in a fire, goes to 911 dispatch, and then 911 dispatch transfers that over to CYDC to take in the report where the location is and then try to get an idea of what to send out there. But they're sending the closest resource, regardless of what agency or land jurisdiction that is there. So CYDC is dispatching anybody from, anything from Forest Service, BLM, ODF to some of our other, well, actually, mostly that's the three that they'll be dispatching. They'll be working closely with 911 if it goes into dispatching our structure departments. And then also, I do want to throw out a disclaimer too that, I want everyone to realize I got so many people on this call. If you hear me saying something that is incorrect or you want to add to it, by all means do, right? I know enough to be dangerous at times. So continuing on. So CWPP, Central Oregon Fire Management Service. So we're going to start at the larger scale, looking at federal side of things and kind of work our way down. But on the federal side of things, we have the U.S. Forest Service and BLM, and together those guys have come together as Central Oregon Fire Management Service. So they have agreements that are like offset agreements. So if it's easier for Forest Service resources to be managing as far as fires on BLM land, then they'll have an offset agreement that Forest Service takes care of the protection responsibilities for this land, and vice versa on the other side of things, where BLM may be taking care of stuff on the Forest Service side. So CWPP is one of the entities that is being dispatched through our dispatch center over there. So CWPP together, they come to bear a lot of resources on our fires. So the federal side of things, they have anything from, hand crews and engines to, you can see a helicopter, smoke jumpers, repellers, air tankers, a lot of different resources that come out there, all the way to some of our type 3 incident teams that they assemble across all those agencies. So we've had that Monty fire out there by Lake Billy Chinook over this last couple of weeks, and one of the way that was being managed was under a type 3 team. So smaller teams, they're able to manage some of our smaller fires, anything from a few hundred acres to a couple thousand, depending on the complexity out there. Then Oregon Department of Forestry. So we're going to kind of zoom around on this map and kind of show some of those areas, right? And I think everybody picked this up, but looking at this map above, right? The green is the Forest Service, the yellow is the BLM lands. So that's kind of where those federal lands are, and then the white, of course, is private. Oregon Department of Forestry, their district is in the blue here, so it covers some of that Forest Service land, but for the most part, ODF is tasked with protection on private lands. They're paying a patrol assessment into the local district. So a little bit of background on ODF, and this is where I may be a little bit off, but the basic concept was, years ago when there was lots of timber companies out here, those timber companies got together, created an association, paid into to having protection resources like engines and stuff to suppress fires or to manage those fires out there. And eventually, over time, the state stepped in, took over that assessment from those landowners, and then also added in some general funding to help bolster the program to be able to manage those fires a little bit more consistently across the lands. So ODF was created and manages those fires. So this is their boundary. They're part of that closest resource. So COIDC sees a fire somewhere out here and they're calling it in. It doesn't matter if it's an ODF fire or if it's an ODF resource or a Forest Service or a BLM resource. The agreement is that the closest resource will respond to the fire. So they'll call whatever is nearest by to be able to get out there, get the size up on the fire and begin to take action accordingly. So the other piece here that you'll see is that the district boundaries, especially as we go to the structure departments, there's quite a bit of overlap between all of these agencies. So as we come into the structure departments, we saw that ODF district fade away, but it ran right down across a lot of these structure departments. So lots of dual protection where you may be paying an assessment or you may be paying into the district of the structure department, but also the ODF district. So if you're looking at, so I guess let's see how to word this correctly. So if there's a dual protection, I'm going to get myself in trouble trying to explain all this, but basically if it's an empty lot without a structure, it's likely paying into just ODF, but if it has a structure, it's likely to be paying into ODF and the structure department. And the structure department is tasked with that protection of that structure. And then ODF is tasked with the wildland fire side of things, but there are mutual aid agreements between the two that allow the usage of one another's equipment to suppress those fires and manage those fires accordingly. So across all of Deschutes County, there's 9 structure departments, so quite a few entities, quite a few people to coordinate with and bring together when we're thinking about CWPPs. And then the one other piece out here, Ed mentioned it earlier when he's talking about the CWPPs extending beyond the county boundaries out here, are the Rangeland Protection Associations. So we've got the Brothers Hampton Rangeland Association that ties into our east and west Deschutes County CWPP. And the Rangeland Association is very similar to the way that the forest associations were prior to ODF working with them, as far as landowners paying into one, or coming together anyway, to supply those fire resources. So rangeland associations are often working directly with BLM out in those areas to manage those fires. And there's a mention of what they generally have for firefighting apparatus. That's oftentimes they're using stuff that's surplus from a federal agency, and then it's being given to the Rangeland Association to help supplement and help them manage their fires. So there's quite a few. I'm going to scroll back up here just so we can see them all together here. Quite a few entities that come into the protection capabilities, right? So thinking in terms of the CWPP, it's several folks that come together that have an interest in how and what goes into those CWPPs that we're putting together. So we pull all of those folks together to kind of talk about anything from what they have with their protection forces out there to the accomplishments that they've been doing as far as fuels reduction or any kind of work that's out there, but also bringing them together at one table to be able to talk across to one another to help build those relationships. Greg, I see your hand up. You got a question there? So I jump to the next. Oh. Oh, well, maybe you froze there, Greg. Maybe we'll come back to you here in a minute. But quite a few folks there that come together, right, that have an interest in how we're putting together these. Oh, this is not looking correct. Oh, there we go. Okay. So out of the CWPPs, as we continue down the road, we've put together our planning area. We've thought about the risk. Oh, Greg, you're there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, question was, is it better to have the several CWPPs within the county? I mean, I understand there's, 7 of them or something like that, but isn't that makes it more difficult to coordinate things?
Yeah, we can, let me come around to that one at the end of this, Greg, because that's a good question, right? I think we might all be feeling and thinking that a very similar thought here. And
Okay,
then we can, because you've got a couple of good things, and I think it would be nice to kind of address those right at the end of that, and kind of frame up a couple of thoughts there.
Okay, gotcha.
So as we kind of pull together our CWPPs and we're thinking about what are the outcomes of this, right? We lean on the cohesive strategy to kind of give us those 3 kind of broad goals of what we're looking at: the resilient landscapes, the fire adapted communities, and the effective wildfire response. So 3 groups, but it definitely categorizes what we're up to, and it definitely helps us to kind of think about what we need to be doing. So the fire adapted communities, I'm gonna move something on my computer here. It's not working. There we go. Let's see. The fire adapted communities, is it's a larger kind of picture of what we're looking at, right? We're thinking about our communities in the terms of being fire prepared, being informed, and making all the decisions, and also staying engaged. When you think about the whole larger fire adapted communities, there's a kind of a piece of a chicken or an egg. CWPP says that we need to have a fire adapted community, and then being a fire adapted community says that you should have a CWPP to help keep that engagement and help inform the decision and the actions that are happening out there. And then we also, so part of that fire adapted community is thinking about not just the private lands, but we're thinking across all the land jurisdiction out there. So we're thinking about how the lands on the federal side of things are being prepared all the way down to the home preparedness itself, or the community being prepared. And then, like I said before, staying engaged in the planning process all the way through with the CWPPs. The next piece of those 3 goals is the resilient landscapes. And especially here in Central Oregon, you know, in the dry pine or dry mixed conifer sites, the fire return interval was pretty low frequency, low intensity, high frequency, sorry, I said that backwards. Low intensity, high frequency fires. So fires came through quite often. In those landscapes, you know, just like this picture shows, large old pines that persist after the fire event. So those are the things that we want to see, you know, not just on the landscape out there, but also the same with our communities as a fire passes through, whether that's passing by our community or through the trees out there after that fire passes through. We still want to see everything to be resilient, everything to still be there, our businesses to still flourish, our communities to still be there, and our forests to still be standing. So that's one of the pieces that we're looking at, is that resilient landscape, and not just vegetation landscape, but the landscape of all of us and everything that's out there. And then the effective fire response. And this definitely, you know, this is an important piece. We started off, or I started the talk here talking about protection capabilities. And through the CWPP process, we're able to bring all of our partners together to one table, talk about what is out there that's available to one another and that we do use. So we aren't, you know, a couple of things. So we're just basically being efficient with our resources, make sure not having too many, or there aren't places that we don't have enough. Excuse me. So being able to share those ideas, build those partnerships, those relationships, and those agreements between one another of utilizing each other's resources when there is a fire on the landscape. So after looking at those 3 goals and kind of identifying what we're looking at with those 3 goals, we come to our recommendations that come out of our CWPPs. And these, for the most part, don't generally change between our CWPPs. I mean, you know, there's a little bit of, you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, these are obvious, like very, very simple things, but they're critical, right? These are the things that we need to do, that need to happen out there, that we want to make sure that we're identifying, right, that we're not leaving off of there. And you'll see that in these CWPPs, there's not really a place that we call out one individual lot or a part of a landscape that we're saying, right here, we've got to have this done for, and we don't do that for a couple of reasons. One is we don't hold ourselves to a goal that's unachievable. So we don't call out something that we find out like, oh, the landowner doesn't even want to do anything, or we don't have the ability to do it. But also we give ourselves the flexibility that we can talk about where the priorities are without nailing ourselves down. And then if somebody is working, whether it's you know, Forest Service is working on a piece of land that they're doing fuels reduction work and building that resilient forest, we can talk about and begin to cater our needs or our funding towards the communities that are around that. So we begin to get that aggregate effect of everybody in that area doing work together. Excuse me. And that also goes the other way around too, right? When we think about our Firewise communities out there, it's quite common that as that Firewise community begins to do more work, or they're beginning to get that recognition process and they're cleaning up around their homes, it helps to kind of justify, either way, it helps to justify some of those treatments, or at least leverage some of those treatments in some of those lands that are deemed to be WUI next to those communities that may be on private land. So on federal land. So if we're doing something on the private side, it makes it easier for the federal side to say, yeah, we need to be doing work here. The communities themselves are moving forward doing work, and we need to complement that work to help strengthen and build that resilient community, that resilient landscape. Okay, so that's what I have on the overview of the CWPPs. You know, I think Ed and I went through quite a bit there, but also because we are in the middle of the Bend CWPP revision, So I think Ed had already said it, but I'm going to say it again. There's 7. Actually, let me do one other thing here. My apologies, kids. Okay. Greg had asked a question about whether that's easier or not. So I thought I could talk through the process of what it takes to revise a CWPP and kind of what I see as the things that have changed over time on the CWPPs that I've been learning over this last couple of years, in ways that we may, who knows if we go down the road, but ways that we could potentially change the way we look at our CWPPs and help ourselves kind of get these things to get them done, so we can focus more on the implementation side of things than the creation of them. But there's 7 CWPPs that are on a 5-year rotation. So every year there's at least one being revised, if not 2 of them. And the revision process, I think this last year, I got them down to, I think, 4 meetings, and those 4 meetings were the overview of kind of what CWPP is, what the goal is that we're going to be doing, a meeting for getting some updates in, a meeting to reviewing all those updates, and then a final, like, this is our product, what's our plan for doing some outreach and getting this out to communities for some review. And then we come back together and get that all out for signatures. So that's 4, if everything goes smooth, it's 4 meetings, and oftentimes it's more than that. I think one of them we did like 7 or 8 meetings this last year for, but about 4 meetings if everything goes well to get that done. And that's not counting the time in between of wordsmithing and then putting all of the same kind of stuff together for each one of these plans. And at least in my mind, one of the things that, going to Greg's question, would it be easier if we had one? I think we have the ability to do that, to go into one CWPP for the county and looking at it in terms of ecoregions of each of these. Let me go to the top so we can see it. Let's see here. So we'd have, each of these would be ecoregions, similar to the way that we started off with, like, taking just the sister CWPP as an example. It used to be broken into several regions within it, but then it was realized that it was more efficient to do it as one larger group. But if we were to do one countywide one, I would see these as going some kind of ecoregion within. And then we would begin to look more of, we're updating one CWPP every 5 years with the opportunity to hold meetings annually to be able to add or include any kind of updates that happen along the way. Right now, we always, the CWPPs, we say they're on a 5-year and then we revisit them annually, but it's pretty tough to revisit each one of those annually. That would be 7 more additional CWPP meetings in a year to visit each one of these, on top of the 4 to 8 meetings that are happening to revise them. So I don't know, hopefully that answers what you're asking there, Greg, a second ago. Yeah. Okay. And then before I jump into the Bend CWPP update in that process, Dean, you have your hand up. Maybe does have his hand up, but I don't know if he's there. Well, Greg, you had your hand up. I don't know if that was a new or the same one. Okay, well, I'm going to move on, and then we'll come back around. Oh, Ray's got a question. I'll go with you, Ray. You got a question?
Yeah, Boone?
Yep.
Am I on?
Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
On the recommendations, should we be looking at something to be a little more proactive in land use and land developments in terms of when we build into the WUI policies and ordinances for resilient landscape and for resistant construction?
Yeah, I believe we we're adding something into the, so for the most part, these are the same between all of those CWPPs. And I think maybe it was, right, Ray, we had a conversation as we're looking at the Bend one to add a piece in there. I don't remember if we put it here. Actually, I think we put it in the piece of the recommendations for home hardening. There's that couple of pages in the CWPP that talk through defensible space and what you do around your home, and the checklist of basically the 10 steps from fire free. I believe that's where we added that in. If I remember right, I'd have to dive into that piece, but I do believe we added that to there. Okay.
No, I'm wondering if it's good to put it, call it out there as a separate bullet, the recommendations.
Yeah, we can definitely visit that. Yeah, let's chat more, Ray, afterwards, and I'll see, especially since the Bend CWPP is out right now. It'd be a good opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so going to CWP, or going to the Bend CWPP. So currently out for review, public review. If you wanted to look at any of those, you can find it off of the story map. You can also come to the Project Wildfire webpage if you would rather. And then I just updated this yesterday. Ed and I were talking about how it's kind of gotten messy over the years. It was harder to figure out what was what. So we kind of scrapped the page a little bit and then started over. But the draft revision is here, and I've already opened it. But we started off, and all CWPPs kind of start the same way, and that is confirming the boundaries, make sure there's nothing that needs to be changed or not. So we actually did end up adjusting the boundary on the Bend CWPP. And what we ended up adjusting is some of this area in the southeast corner. The boundary was coming right up to the edge of the private, and knowing that there's communities like Sundance down here, we wanted to make sure that the land adjoining it within a mile or two along the Forest Service side of things would also be considered WUI, because what they do out there definitely impacts what the community is doing, and vice versa. So we wanted to make sure that that was called out. And then when it does go into time for looking at some treatment of the lands out there on the federal side of things, it definitely helps to be able to say that it's been deemed WUI within the CWPP. It helps to get that work justified and get it done. So we did expand that out. There was a change there. And then the other piece that we look at is getting the all of our accomplishments captured over the last 5 years from the last time that the CWPP was revised. And for the Bend CWPP, we gathered the accomplishments from the Forest Service, BLM, ODF, and then some of the ones that we added in that I thought were pretty critical that had small mentions in the past, but we kind of expanded on them a little bit more, is the city of Bend itself, what's gone on with the city of Bend over the years, as far as some of the fireworks restrictions and stuff like that. And then also Bend Parks and Rec was another big one. I think the work that they've done up Skyliners, working with the tree farm and across all of their parks, has been pretty big. Even if we in the grand scheme, it may not be in the thousands of acres, but it's still in very critical places. And the ways in which that work was getting done through the partnerships within between the Forest Service and Bend Parks and Rec was it's somewhat paving the way of how we can do these cross-boundary projects and really show the partnership and how we can get that aggregate effect to happen and get work done more efficiently without having to replicate the same work on a piece of ground that's just divided by an imaginary line. So those pieces were pretty big to get in there. We also visit the protection capabilities, make sure that we're capturing all of those updates if there's any changes to those. And then this year, we also have been oh, I guess I got one go back on it. We have been, as Ed mentioned earlier, we've been updating all of the Wildfire Risk Explorer across all of these. So Bend also has the updated Risk Explorer now, a little more quantitative versus qualitative as far as what the risk is out there on the ground. So that was updated. And then let's see, I think the last piece is adding in of the critical transportation routes, as far as, I hesitate to use the evacuation routes, but that is basically their evacuation routes, but they're the critical transportation routes, ensuring that we're identifying what they are, and if that's part of the CWPP and the planning process. We discuss whether or not we need to identify different ones or revise the maps. As a matter of fact, I think I've got a map owed to me from Nathan right now. He was just about done with it last I talked with him. Let me look at my notes really fast to make sure I'm not missing something for you guys before I hand this back over. Oh, yeah, and then the last piece is confirm our action items and our priorities, and to the point that Ray was just making, our recommendations, making sure that we're still having that community involvement. And Ray has been a good partner in all of this. He's representing both District 2, but also Woodside Ranch as a community. So make sure that we're involving those folks, but confirm our action items and priorities as we go through it. And then I guess the piece going back to the CWPP that I'd like to kind of add in is that revision process, be able to have something over here talks about what it takes to revise, and then also a place for us to see what CWPP is being revised. Okay, I feel like I just did a ton of talking, and I want to see if there's questions out there. Dean still has his hand up.
I was just going to mention, Boone, that I'm not sure if Dean's the one that also called in on the phone, but if you're trying to unmute on the phone, we did have a phone number there at one time. It's *6 on your phone. So just we don't have the ability anymore as hosts to unmute people. And so you have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me
Yep.
now? Oh, good. Yeah, I'm having bandwidth problems, so I've had to reboot about 3 times, and I even called in. I tried *6, and then you weren't able to hear my question before. Briefly, the CWPPs are revised every 5 years, and I sat in on the CWPP meetings, the ones that I could, for the Lapine CWPP when it was revised the last time. And I was a little bit surprised and disappointed that there wasn't more buy-in from anyone in the community. It was all agency partners around the table coming up with a CWPP. And I don't know if you can have some kind of a promotion or something to where community members or go-to people in that area can actually input a little bit more. Thanks.
Yeah, Dean, that's good input, and it's been, my experience has been surprising to see the changes across. I've only been doing this for the last year or two, but across each one of the CWPPs, how the participation changes. Generally, we try to send it out, or at least I send it out to the Project Wildfire list, and then I also maintain that Firewise communities list, and I send it to those folks as well, not just the ones that are recognized, but those that have shown interest in the past, hoping that we'd be able to capture some of those folks. And then then we've got kind of the other side of things in some of the areas where it's like, wow, we get a lot of people emailing and calling, and sometimes that's ends up being a misunderstanding, that they feel that there's a regulation in there that they'd like to change, and say, well, it's not regulation, it's recommendation, and it's more of collaboration and partnership and sharing information than anything. But yeah, good comment, Dean. If we can increase participation, I will do what I can to continue to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah. And anyone else? see. Greg, it looks like your hand's up. There you are.
Yeah, I just further comment on that is the fact that I'm a part of the public on the CWPP for Bend, Dean. So, you know, they do allow public to be included in it.
Mm-hmm.
So just information.
Yes, it's great.
All right, I don't see anybody else with a hand raised or coming off mute, so maybe we'll, since we are at 9 o'clock, transition over to roundtable, if that works for you, Boone.
Yep, that works for me. Sounds
Okay,
good.
and just to note, if you're looking for a direct link, we do have a shortcut link in the chat to, if you want to check out that story map in any greater detail, scroll around those maps or interact with those maps at all. That shortcut will get you to the very long link that's hard to memorize that comes from the ArcGIS platform. So save that for later if you're interested. With that, I would offer any chance for roundtable updates, and I can go down the list. We probably have enough time. So if you don't have any updates, see a couple folks that don't, that's great. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of run down my list real quick here. Maybe I'll start with Ariel. Anything from OSU Extension?
Yeah, just briefly wanted to update that OSU Extension just put out their latest version of Life on the Dry Side newsletter, and it's focused on drought. I just put a link in the chat, and yeah, we just ask that people share that, and there's definitely a lot of overlap of recommendations for forested areas for drought resilience that overlaps with fire resilience. So that's something to check out. Don't have too many other updates besides that. I think in September, we're gonna bring back the next round of fire aware, fire prepared webinars. So I'll update when we have more information on that. But that first one would probably be going over fire season 2021 review whenever the fire season decides to end. So hopefully that's sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Thanks, Ariel. Commissioner DeBone, I saw you turned your camera on. Did you want to share any update?
I've had it on and off about 6 times during this meeting. Okay, so the observation, a couple things. You know, this is interesting. These storybook website things really put a big picture together, and we're seeing that. So the state legislature is asking us to define, you know, wildland-urban interface. What does defensible space look like, and resiliency? And we're digitizing the whole thing right now. Just like we're showing different tools, you can zoom in on, you know, your neighborhood and understanding the slope and the fuel mix or the plant mix and the density of fuels. We're digitizing the whole thing right now, and this is really amazing to see. And hopefully it's going to really be a great partnership on the facts on the ground and the fuel reduction and defensible space. I'm looking towards the day that we have a low intensity burn walking across the forest floor somewhere and nobody's panicked about it. You know, so really there's an opportunity here to get to that point. Also for Project Wildfire, you know, thank you everybody for joining us. This is a you know, very challenging time, COVID on the rise again, but I look forward to having us in a room. Maybe I propose that we try to do something this year, even if it's just outdoor, standing, you know, safely apart, or however we need to proceed, because we've been doing this online the whole year, and it's really, I do feel disconnected from those folks that I recognize here, and I just want to say hi to. So let's think about that for the rest of the year. Is there just an optimal time to try to, you know, and we're going into the fall cleanup season too. So maybe just one kickoff to, you know, get together personally. So that's my other thought. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, we had planned to start at least offering a hybrid option this month, and just with the spike of cases and different agencies that have different requirements, we decided to kind of roll back to virtual, at least for this month, but we are going to take advantage of whatever opportunity we can find to try to get some folks face to face to get some of that kind of person to person interaction. So that's I'm glad you bring that up, and we will strive to do that at least once this year, but hopefully more than that if the opportunity presents itself. So other updates, I don't see anybody with a hand up, so I'm just going to call on a few folks. Wonder if Chris Paul from the State Fire Marshal's Office has anything with some of the new programs that State Fire Marshal might be coming out with from 762 or other efforts.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Paul from the State Fire Marshal's Office in the brand new Community Risk Reduction Program. We're still building out the program, reaching out and establishing partners, both within the state and outside the state to help us build the program. Really nothing new to report on that front. A couple of things I will hit on is great job, Boone, on the description of how things work with COFMIS and ODF and all that. It's a complicated mess some days, and it's worse over here than where I was in Clackamas County. Speaking of Clackamas County, I'll bring up, you talk about taking your CWPP and just going county-wide. My experience over in Clackamas County is we had a county-wide plan, and it got it's such a large plan at that point that you don't tend to, it's harder to get traction with particular projects within it. When we redid it in 2012, we actually broke it down to each fire district had its own chapter. So they had their own specific, community, for lack of a better term, what they wanted to do within theirs. And that seemed to work better. So, seeing the way you guys are doing over here where, you went really small to begin with, and then you kind of expanded those out to kind of match some jurisdictional boundaries that make sense with partners. That's a great idea, as I see it, if you went to a full countywide plan over here, I think you start losing details in it. Just my thoughts on it. And we did the same thing. I was there when we did Multnomah County's first one, which was a lot of work. When you start identifying all those partners and everyone who wants to be at the table, that was a 2-year process to develop it, and still missed a lot of parts. So, you guys are doing great work. Hopefully within a month or two, I'll have some more updates on what we're doing and what we're bringing, but you guys are doing great work.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's good input. And what I was thinking, if we did the state or county-wide, we would do, like you just said, keep kind of those smaller chapters or regions within, and then it would be like one overview every 5 years, one meeting that's an overview, and then a meeting with each one of those areas to capture and engage those partners, then roll it back up into that one plan. But I don't know. Just kind of thinking out loud. I'll let the updates continue on with the round table here.
Great, thanks, Chris. Commissioner Adair, do you have anything to share?
Yes, I'm just curious. Do we know what started the Grandview fire? It's been over a month now, and I'm wondering, has there been a report on what started it? Because thinking of the Grandview fire and where it was reminds me of Mackenzie Canyon. They don't have the fire protection of a fire district, and I'd actually been working on finding another evacuation route for those group of homeowners, and ran into you could say some really big boulders. So anyway, anybody has that, and apparently the drought issue is on the West Coast. Seeing what's happening with Lake Mead, Lake Powell, it's actually quite frightening when you think about food sources, what's happening in Jefferson County, what's happening to agriculture, and the lack of water. So if we have a reason why the Grandview fire started, I would love to know.
Yes, I think that started on ODF protection land. So Chase, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will ask if that's investigation's been concluded yet. Do you know?
I do not know at this time. I've been out on other fires myself and just got back filling in for Gordon while his team's out. So sorry to not have an answer at this time for that.
Okay, we'll try to track that down. If we can find anything after the meeting, we'll pass it along to you, Commissioner. And Chase, while I have you, any other updates you'd like to share from the Department of Forestry?
I don't believe so. Like I said, I'm just going in for Gordon, so trying to catch up as it is, but not sure if he's gotten it out in past meetings, but the West Bend to Sisters area, we do have a new grant that's going to be coming online here pretty soon for fuels reduction, so that'll be helpful, and hope to see that in the next couple months. Otherwise, in the middle of fire season and tackling that beast, and no current fires on the Prineville Sisters unit.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's always a good reminder that there are either grant opportunities out there or coming. And I guess with that, I might transition over to Lars from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. If you want to share, I think you all have been doing some work with landowners in that same region under the Joint Chiefs project, or any other updates you might want to share.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me all right. Wow, the story map was awesome. Thank you for spending the time to go through that. That's pretty exciting. One of the things that really stuck out with me that I really liked was that kind of spoke wheel near the bottom that kind of had all the different all the different parts and pieces of what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it kind of made me think too of like, there's been so much good work that's already taken place. I wonder if there's an opportunity on the story map to maybe talk about that too, almost like a monitoring. I mean, I think about monitoring because I'm, my job, but just be able to tell that story of what the work has been done. So, but it's pretty cool. I really love it. Yeah, Joint Chiefs. This is our first year, with this new Buttes to Basins Joint Chiefs program in play. And so that area, that geographic area, kind of goes from Camp Sherman down to the High Desert Museum, kind of that belt there of dry pine, WUI interface. This year, I mean, we're working on the contracts right now, developing them from landowners who have signed up, but we're looking at 283-ish acres of projects that have been signed up. So that's pretty exciting. And, these acres, these are in like the high priority, WUI places. This is, so it's pretty exciting. So right now we're taking signups and applications for next year. So we'll probably be taking those signups through, if I had to guess, we don't have a specific date right now, but it'll probably be sometime in November or end of October, November, sometime there, where we'll probably cut off those applications to kind of start planning those for fiscal year 22. So yeah, if you know landowners who might be interested in doing fuels reduction work, and they want to work with NRCS, send them our way. I did have a question though about the grant for you. This grant that you guys were talking about, does it work for like post wildfire recovery? I've gotten a couple of calls from folks who are interested in doing like, taking down hazard trees and maybe replanting and doing some seeding, those sorts of projects. Does the grant kind of cover that at all?
It does not. It is focused on really defensible space and communities. So it's more on the preparing for the coming wildfire.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, some of these smaller scale fires, it doesn't seem like until the fire gets really huge, that we get a surplus of funds for post wildfire activity. But these smaller scale fires, it's like, maybe there's an opportunity there, for small scale rehab work. I don't know, maybe something to think about down the line.
Yeah, I've made a note. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and to your first comment, I would just say, yeah, that's something we've talked about, and I think that the story map will be a work in progress. We've talked about adding another piece on each plan as it's being revised, so you can delve into that plan revision as well as when we do revise the plan, we do collect accomplishments from everybody, and trying to compile those into a website is aspiration, I guess. We're not there yet, but it's definitely on the list of things we might try to do. So other updates from folks. Anybody else have stuff to share? I can continue to call on people. See David Mormon turning his camera on. So American Red Cross.
Good morning. I just wanted to report, many of you may know this, but our local disaster program manager, Kristen Heath, has promoted to another position within the Red Cross region. I think she's going to be kind of filling out both roles to get us through fire season, but Red Cross will be recruiting to fill Kristen's position. So I just want to make people aware of that change. She's done a great job, and I think Red Cross has recognized that with her promotion within the region. That's it.
Great, thanks, David. Dean, I see you raise your hand. You want to share anything from UDRC or anything else, I suppose?
Yes, Ed. First, I wanted to thank Boone for forwarding to me the retrofit information for home hardening against ember intrusion. It's really comprehensive, and I would recommend it for anyone that actually hasn't checked it out first, because that's a component that a lot of the homeowners leave out when they're thinking about defensible space. They're concentrating on the landscape mostly. And thanks for the presentation today too. For the Upper Deschutes River communities, in our defensible space program, reimbursement program, we've gotten over twice as many applicants this year as we reimbursed last year. So there's a lot more awareness in the communities of the risks that we have. And looking at like how many thousands of structures are in South County, it doesn't really compare with changing all the neighborhoods to be fire adapted. But we're also noticing that as people start doing the defensible space, then the neighbors around the area get to see that, and they start making efforts on their own. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dean. A few other folks left, so I'll try to remember who didn't have updates. But Chief Kemna, anything from Redmond?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. How about Aaron Kincolin from the SWCD?
Morning, everyone. My camera does not seem to be working this week, but yeah, we've been helping Lars and NRCS with the Joint Chiefs projects, and hopefully we'll start doing some outreach for the next year's funding. And that's all I have.
Great, thanks. Bev from Sister Camp Sherman, anything to share? Okay, might be technical difficulties or maybe nothing to share. And I think the only other person that I might not have called on that I can remember that didn't have an update was Ray Meow, I guess. Ray, anything to share from?
Yeah, nothing from Woodside Ranch, but just to remind anybody who has an HOA who's still on the call here, that the Rural Fire Protection District number 2 does have grants for fuels reductions and defensible space creation, not on the scale of the counties, but we have, I think this year, about $15,000 in grants. And these are reimbursements up to 50%. You have to submit a bill for work done, and then we could match up to 50%. There's an application process, and just contact Gary Marshall at the fire district. And the grants range anywhere from a couple $100 to, I think the maximum we gave was 1 year $4,000, maybe $5,000. And again, same criteria as for the counties. The greater number of people involved, the greater benefit is, the greater likelihood of being approved.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I think we're not quite out of time, but I think we're out of updates unless somebody else had one. Just pause real quick. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Good to see you all, and we will see you in some form or fashion back here in September, if not before. Thanks a lot.